All right, today we're going to do something really cool. We're going to shrink down to the microscopic level and sneak into the antibiotic war room. We're taking a deep dive into how one of the most important weapons in medicine's arsenal, the beta-lactams, like penicillin, actually wages its war on bacteria.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll look at what makes these drugs a true superweapon. Then we'll zero in on the bacteria's biggest weakness, its Achilles heel. After that, we'll look at the classic theory of how they work before uncovering a deeper conspiracy that kind of changes everything. And finally, we'll get to the good stuff, the antibiotic hit list.
Okay, so what is it that makes beta-lactams the absolute cornerstone of modern medicine? Well, for decades, their incredible success has really boiled down to two very special properties.
First off, these antibiotics are incredibly powerful. They deliver a really fast, lethal blow to bacteria, but, and this is key, only when those bacteria are actively growing and multiplying. And second, and this is just as crucial, they are amazingly non-toxic to us, to the person who's sick. It's this perfect 1-2 punch, absolutely deadly to the invader, but safe for the patient.
So how does this superweapon pull that off? Well, like any great strategy, it targets the enemy's weak spot. For a bacterium, that vulnerability is actually its main defense, its cell wall. You can think of it like the outer armor of a fortress.
Now, this wall is made of a really tough, mesh-like material called peptidoglycan, and it is absolutely essential for the bacterium's survival. It gives it its shape, it protects it from the harsh world outside, and without it, the bacterium would literally just burst under its own pressure. This makes that cell wall the perfect target for an attack.
And that brings us to the story we thought we knew. For a very long time, the explanation for how penicillin worked seemed pretty straightforward. It was all about sabotaging the construction of that critical outer armor.
Imagine a construction site, okay? In step 1, the building blocks, these long strands of peptidoglycan, show up ready to be assembled. In step 2, this specialized worker, an enzyme called transpeptidase, comes in to link all those strands together, making the wall super strong. But then, step 3. The beta-lactam antibiotic arrives on the scene, and it literally just latches onto that enzyme, blocking it completely. Construction just stops. The wall gets weak, and the bacterium dies. Simple enough, right?
Well, not so fast. As scientists started looking closer, they began to realize that this simple story of sabotage just wasn't the whole picture. The reality they discovered is way more complex, and honestly, a whole lot cooler.
And this is where the plot thickens. It turns out, the antibiotic wasn't just taking out one key construction worker. Nope, it was targeting an entire network of them, a whole conspiracy of different proteins all working together to build and maintain that cell wall.
So how many targets are we talking about here? Instead of that one lone transpeptidase enzyme, researchers studying E. coli found that penicillin was actually binding to at least 7 different distinct proteins, each one with its own unique and vital job.
So these targets got a name, penicillin-binding proteins, or PBPs for short. And you got to understand, these are the real stars of the show. They aren't just one type of worker, they're an entire crew of specialists. You've got guys responsible for making the cell longer, others for helping it divide, the whole shebang.
Okay, now this is where it gets really fascinating. Hitting each of these different PBP targets has a totally different and sometimes super dramatic effect on the bacterium. Welcome to the PBP hit list.
Just take a look at this. If an antibiotic hits PBP1, which is in charge of making the cell longer, the bacterium literally explodes. It's called rapid lysis. But if you hit PBP2, which maintains that classic rod shape, the bacterium bloats up into this weird oval shape before it dies. And get this, if you inhibit PBP3, the specialist for cell division, the bacterium just keeps growing into these long, creepy filaments because it can't split in two. And what's really interesting is that hitting PBPs 4, 5, or 6, well, that's not even lethal.
So the crucial point here is that the simple idea of penicillin stops cell wall building is a massive oversimplification. The reality is, different beta-lactam drugs act like different kinds of assassins. Each one has its own preferred target on this PBP hit list. Let me show you what I mean. Your classic penicillin G, its favorite target is PBP3, the one that causes those long filaments. Then you have a different class, the first-gen cephalosporins. They have a higher preference for PBP1A, causing that dramatic explosion. And then you have a true specialist drug like amdenicilin, which binds only to PBP2, the shapekeeper. They're all attacking the cell wall, sure, but they're doing it in totally different ways.
All of this detailed knowledge leaves us with a really exciting question. Now that we know about this hit list, and we know that different drugs have their favorite targets, could this open up a whole new way of designing antibiotics? Could we engineer hyper-specialized sniper drugs that hit only the most vulnerable PBB targets in certain bacteria? It's a fascinating thought, and it's right at the cutting